And with us right now, we have Benjamin Tallis, Senior Research Fellow, German Council on Foreign Relations. Good evening, sir. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Good evening. Pleasure to be with you.
So let me start with this first question that probably puzzles many people. So EU foreign ministers met in Luxembourg today to discuss further military help for Ukraine. And after last week's summit in Brussels, we were pretty sure that something big could happen today, right? But we know that will be no mass Patriot systems deliveries to Ukraine. So what happened over the weekend?
Well, I think there's possibly been a little bit of complacency looking to the US and expecting the US to take up the slack and carry the burden, which has been the default mode of European operation until the hiatus in the Congress really delayed this particular aid package. There's also a lot of negotiation going on about who precisely is going to send what. And working out who has it to spare. And certainly Spain and Greece, which are quite well equipped with air defense systems, are coming under intense pressure to actually do more to help Ukraine. Germany took the lead on this one with this special initiative, the Immediate Action on Air Defense Initiative, or IAAD, and agreed to send an extra Patriot system as well as an IRIS-T air defense system. But others have yet to really step up and match that offer. But there's intense diplomacy behind the scenes. It's just taking a little bit longer to get it together.
But I would like to stay on the topic of Germany because, as you said, they're doing a lot for Ukraine. However, there's still pressure because they're not donating Taurus cruise missiles to Kiev. But my question is it fair to put so much pressure on Germany when they're doing a lot, much more than any other country in Europe?
Yes, it is fair for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, actually, winning this war is in all democracies' interests, but it's especially in Europeans' interests. We are more directly exposed and much more drastically vulnerable to the consequences of what happens in Ukraine. So we should really be the ones stepping up, not relying on the US. Now, Germany, as you rightly say, in absolute numbers, has committed the most support to Ukraine, both humanitarian, financial, and military. But you'd expect that because it's Europe's largest economy. The biggest problem here is that Germany's Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, hasn't actually committed to Ukraine's victory. And so it seems as though Germany isn't really playing to the same kind of team goal as the rest of the allies. And that's what it makes it really hard for allies to get on board with and support what Germany is doing. The air defense initiative is a step in the right direction in that regard, but that air defense is fine, but it's not going to win you a war. We need to see that kind of initiative on weapons like Taurus, which could hit the Russians where it hurts and actually start pinning them back.
Right, you mentioned the growing pressure on Spain and Greece to share the air defense systems, but you know, I just can't understand it. How to explain the fact that Greece doesn't want to share its Patriots or S-300s out of fear that Turkey, which is also a member of NATO, could attack it?
Yes, this is a truly anachronistic situation, and it's one that's a continued embarrassment to NATO that two of their members are actually at daggers or patriots drawn, and so therefore are unwilling to give more of their own supplies lest it reduce their own deterrence. I mean, a political solution to this has to be found eventually, or some kind of political resolution within NATO to say, what are both these countries actually doing in there if they can't even agree not to potentially attack each other? With that being said, the question is this really a genuine concern for Greece, or is this being used as an excuse? And certainly in the case of Spain, there's no such excuse. Spain has Taurus cruise missiles as well, and we should be asking questions about why those aren't being sent, as well as air defense systems. And as we found out earlier in the course of the war, an awful lot of Leopard tanks, some of which are in a bad state, but which there wasn't really the willingness to push through sending to Ukraine. That raises questions about Spain's commitment to Ukraine's victory, and other European allies really need to be asking questions about that, because this isn't just Germany that is at fault here. There are others too.
Now, we have to, like we mentioned Germany, we also have the Czech initiative. We also know that Denmark will send Ukraine all the F-16 that President Zelensky was begging for, I should say. However, we also know about Russia's offensive that is coming at the end of May, beginning of June. Is this equipment going to reach Ukraine on time?
That's an open question, and the urgency with which we're seeing this process dealt with in Washington now, finally, is indicative of the worry that it won't get there in time. So we need to give Ukraine as much as we can, as soon as we can, in order that it can truly move to active defense, as it's called, and make sure that Ukraine doesn't give up too much ground when the Russians really start to attack. Now, the composition of that US aid package is going to be key in this regard, because that 23 billion that is there to replenish stocks of the US Army and the US military means that 23 billion's worth of stocks can be sent to Ukraine from what they have already, and that can be got to the front fairly quickly. So if there are sufficient numbers of ATACMS, if there are AMRAAM medium-range air-to-air missiles, that will make a really big difference, as will the ammunition that your colleague mentioned a second ago, the 155mm shells. That it would be possible to get to the front, and that would make a big difference in blunting the effectiveness of the Russian advance. But in general terms, it really remains an open question, and we need to be pulling out all the stops. We need to realize the urgency of this process, because the danger, of course, is that there could be a gradual retreat followed by a sudden collapse if morale were to collapse, or if the Russians were to be able to maintain a significant firepower advantage over parts of the Ukrainian front for enough time. So this has to be a matter of urgency, and we have to provide the quantity, the quality, but we have to do it at speed.
Well, we already know that soldiers in Ukraine I think, are giving up. Their morale is not great.
They're not giving up. They are exhausted,
but they're exhausted. But they know they don't have ammunition as we speak. So this is not probably, too boosting, right? Morale boosting.
I would say they are very far from giving up.
Well, hopefully. I mean, hopefully you are right.
Right. Now, apparently the only decision made today during this EU Foreign Ministers Summit was to impose more sanctions on Iran, right? Especially to hit its drone production. Now, to what extent will that help Ukraine at the current moment?
I think it's probably more of a symbolic measure than an effective sanction, because we've seen a failure to actually engage in proper sanctions enforcement, and we still see Western components turning up in Russian systems, let alone systems produced by Russia's allies. Moreover, there's facilities now set up in Russia to produce these things, these Shahed drones and so on. And as I say, violation of sanctions is widespread. So while it's a symbolic measure the EU is taking, I don't necessarily think it's going to be the most effective. A clear declaration from the German Chancellor that Ukraine should win, following that up with necessary materiel, France stepping up with the material to back up its strong rhetoric, UK doing the same thing. That would be a much more effective way of going about winning this war. It is a war on all fronts. That's economic as well as military. But without doing major steps or taking major steps such as seizing Russia's frozen assets, the whole 300 billion, and really demonstrating our will to win there following the US Repo Act that's been passed, I don't think measures like this are the ones that will either truly restore Ukrainian morale nor have a material effect on the battlefront.
Right. So that explains a lot. Benjamin Tallis, thank you so much, and thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Pleasure to be with you.